So it is a bit of a breezy day today.
It's a very breezy day.
Nice.
Very pleasant. Funny enough, actually, as we sit here, it's been quite rainy in this whole area. We've got these northwesterlies blowing down the Java Sea, and yet we sit right in the middle of a dry patch, don't we?
Maybe we should tell people where we are.
Well, we're still at Asahan, which is where we were in the last podcast, hiding away from the weather, waiting for our window.
Southwest Lombok.
Yep. And it's the rainy season, and yet we've been patiently waiting to fill up our tanks with water, and we're just not getting any rain. It's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
you look at the weather radar and we're surrounded by it.
It's really strange. It's all going past us in the south. I spoke to a couple of guys on shore, and they were absolutely delighted when it did pour down 2 days ago, once. That's the entire time we've been here. We had some lovely rain at night, but they're not seeing enough rain here, and the farmers are starting to worry.
Yeah, we spoke to our driver, I think it was last week. He said one of his friends had borrowed money off the bank to invest in his crops and has lost it all because he's just not had his crops growing.
Rice needs a lot of water, of course. Anyway, more important topics. What have you done to your head? Can you just explain? There's a great big scab running from the top of your head to your ear.
I don't know if anyone can, if you're watching this rather than listening, I have this patch here. Now, last week we took a taxi into town and I was sitting in the back seat thinking, do you know what? I feel like I've been sunburnt on my head, and I know I haven't been out in the sun. And when I have been out, I've been wearing my cap, and this felt, it was getting more and more painful. We hopped out of the car and I took my cap off and said to Brian, who we were with, does my head look sunburnt? He goes, what on earth's going on with your forehead? Well, it turns out I had these welts and scabs all the way down the side of my forehead and sort of down towards my eye. Turns out it's that horrible acid beetle, I call them.
Blister beetle is a sort of generic term. They are all around the world apparently, but certainly not in the UK. We've never seen them before, but we came across them over here in Southeast Asia. Red and black. The markings are different depending on what country. They always seem to get us in bed.
Yes.
At night.
Yeah. By the way, the reason why we just wanted to mention this is because, of course, the last podcast we talked about living with critters aboard the boat, and these are some of these rare critters that we get. We have come across them before, and we've both been blistered by them before. But basically, what happens is, you unwittingly try and brush away this little bug that lands on you, and what happens is, if you break its skin, it releases an acid. And obviously at some point, whether it was in my baseball cap when I put it on my head or maybe lying in bed at night, I brushed something and it released this acid all over the top of my head. And it's, I know in Africa they've got the Nairobi fly, I think it's called, the Nairobi ant.
They've definitely got them in Australia because Australia has everything, and theirs probably kill you, knowing the Australian animals.
There's quite a few bugs that release an acid and they are all red and black. Funny enough, it's just nature telling us, be careful of the red and black little creepy crawlies.
So I think your theory about it being in the hat is the right one. I think it got stuck in your cap, because looking at where the scarring is, it makes complete sense. So we now both need to check our caps before we put them on.
Yep, check for spiders in your boots and horrible little acid bugs in your caps. Anyway, I think we've chatted enough. We need to talk about this particular episode. This was my idea unusually this week because
it's dear to your heart.
Yeah, well, it just occurred to me there have been a number of occasions in the last couple of weeks when we have tried to source various bits for the boat and have really struggled. Now, tomorrow we're going to nip over to the marina and we're going to go and see a couple of new cruising friends, Tim and Bev, isn't it?
Barb.
Tim and Barb. My apologies, Barb. Tim and Barb. They've just come back from Australia and Tim very kindly sourced for us some stainless screws. 316
being the operative.
Or 304. Could be 316 or 304. The point being that these are essential screws for a little bit of boat maintenance we've got to do.
Because they're marine resistant, that's why they're so important.
Yep. And you cannot find them in Mataran.
Right.
You can't get something as simple as a stainless screw. You can't find them on Lombok. We even spoke to our mechanic Hendro and said to him, do you know where we can get some from? And he said, well, you're probably going to have to source them from Jakarta through Tokopedia or Shopee, the online shops. But since Tim was back in Australia, he kindly volunteered to pick some up for us.
It's really interesting because we're here in Lombok. Now, Lombok is a tourist destination. It's right next to Bali. You'd think you'd get anything here, but it's not true. And we're talking about sourcing things in remote places. So there's remote and there's remote. I mean, Indonesia itself is quite difficult, isn't it, to get things?
Yes, we'll go through a few of those things
Okay.
in a minute, but you're right. It is, well, and we've discussed this before, this feeling of isolation that you get when you're cruising around the Indonesian islands. And I think a lot of that isolation comes not from your physical proximity to landmass, but the feeling of if something were to go wrong or if you've got to fix something, it's not as straightforward as being in the more popular places like Phuket in Thailand, for example.
Yeah, I mean, Thailand, you can get 316. You can get most things because they're very yacht savvy. So, you know, Thailand, I don't really consider as being remote anywhere in Thailand, really. We start getting to Malaysia and it can get a bit weird, particularly around Borneo, around Sabah and up the eastern coast. Not quite so well, you know, I mean, the shops there are not quite in the same league when it comes to marine things. And in Indonesia, as you say, just completely hopeless a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there have been a number of occasions. Now, we should say in the next episode you're going to see, so we're not going to talk about this too much in this podcast, but we had to get some seals for an item on our boat. We'll talk about it more in the episode. We thought we could source these seals from Jakarta, and again, Hendro very kindly volunteered to source these from Jakarta. Absolutely no chance of getting them here in Mataram, in Lombok. And, well, it turns out he managed to source them. It took 2 weeks to get here, and lo and behold, they didn't fit. They weren't quite the right seals.
Well, we'll talk about that in the episode, but I think the point is that when you've got a problem with something like that and it's so specialised, you've got to bring it in. Bringing stuff into Indonesia from overseas is full of problems, is it not?
Yeah. So I think when we were up at Madana, Peter had a system in place where if you used DHL, it was pretty smooth. However, you have to pay your import fees. Now, at this point, we should talk about yachts in transit. Because the idea of a yacht in transit is that, in theory, you can import items for your boat and you provide the paperwork to show that it is a spare part for your boat, and you can import it tax-free.
Okay, and you're supposed to show it when you leave the country, to show that you've not sold it to anyone locally and that it is purely for you.
Yep, that is correct.
We did it in Thailand.
We did it once in Thailand.
With a bonded warehouse.
Yes, well, that's bonded warehouse. That's slightly different. In theory, you can import stuff yourself without involving customs. In Malaysia, you have this thing called an HIN number, and I remember trying to go through this with James at Pancall Marina. It didn't work.
No.
We have never successfully imported an item for the boat for a yacht in transit. It just hasn't. It always gets held up in customs.
Yeah.
Customs always want their 25-30%.
Who were we talking to about this the other day? Someone who's tried it, and they said I know, it was Ray, and he was talking about going way back when he was a commercial sailor, and it was always held up.
Yep. I think it could have been Ray as well, who was talking about a friend who owns a boat. He did successfully import something as a part for a yacht in transit. The problem then was that he was then asked to leave immediately.
That's right, yeah.
So that's that. As far as customs were concerned, that was the prerequisite, was that you're working on your boat to be leaving the country, and they asked him to leave immediately. Now, I don't know what the upshot of that was, and of course, if you're on the hard working on your boat, well, you can't leave immediately, can you? So
yes. So I mean, one thing we've learned over here in most of Southeast Asia is it's not. Sometimes it's negotiable. If you've got a brown paper package full of a little bit of cash in there, it may be negotiable. Sometimes they will listen to your problem and work it out, but it usually involves either a weight or money, and the rules aren't the same as they are in the UK. They're very flexible, shall we say, over here. But on the whole, there is no way round paying somebody something when you bring something in from overseas.
I think that's what it boils down to, doesn't it? someone somewhere wants their cut,
Yes.
shall we say.
The one thing I did do is I did manage, nothing to do with boating, but a woman has her needs. I needed some new bras, and I like my M&S bras, and there's an M&S Marks and Spencer, for those that don't know, Indonesia website, got on there, ordered some bras. I thought, oh, maybe they've got the stock is here. But in fact, looking at the way it was sent out, it was sent from the UK, and it was delivered directly to the marina here on Lombok, and at no stage did I have to pay any money. So I guess that Marks and Spencer have got some kind of deal, and it's all worked out for you. And in truth, it wasn't that much to get it here. So.
I suppose
Marks and Spencer.
well, I mean, it sounds like a silly anecdote, doesn't it? Talking about bras, but I think that's a serious subject. Is
Yeah.
Underwear, especially for us larger gentlemen who are packing perhaps a little bit extra girth, shall we say? I mean, I struggle to get underwear because the only place I can buy underwear from is what's the Japanese store?
Uniqlo.
Uniqlo, and of course, Uniqlo only goes up to XL, and their XL is not particularly generous.
No.
So that's where I have to get my underwear from, and they just about fit. And of course, in the tropics, you get through underwear like nobody's business because of the saltwater environment. The elastic goes, and I know, your bras literally just fall apart, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, nothing like what it was like in the UK. They could last forever in the UK. Hand wash them, keep them in excellent condition. It's great. But over here, yeah, combination of the moisture in the air, the moisture on you, the sweat, and the marine environment, which just kills anything elasticated. It's the same with swimming costumes and things like that. Anything that's got elastic in it.
Do you think bras would count as yacht in transit?
Some of the size of mine. You could use them as sails.
Spare set of sails.
Storm sails, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds silly talking about underwear, but it is one of those things that I think what tends to happen as a general rule when you're buying things for the boat is when you find it, you buy it in bulk.
We always do, yeah.
And that applies across the board. Cheese is a very good example. We love our cheese. It's not readily available in Southeast Asia generally because they're not a cheese eating region, but you can buy cheese here, and when you do, you tend to buy it in bulk because you know that you may not be able to pick it up again for another 3 months. Okay, again, not everyone wants to be eating cheese, but I think that does apply to a lot of things. Now, another one that I came across the other day, I was looking for 5 micron water filters.
Yeah.
And for some reason, in Malaysia, it seemed as if every other shop in Malaysia sold filters. And I just got into the habit of just grabbing a handful of filters for the water maker, being able to change those filters regularly, knowing that I could, pick some more up just down the way wasn't a problem. And it wasn't until only the other week when I realised I'm running out of 5 micron filters. Oh well, so-and-so shop will have them, Ace Hardware will have them, Mr. DIY will have them. No, we came across carbon filters.
20 micron.
And 25 micron filters.
Which we have plenty of.
Yeah, which we don't use. Yeah, it was just another one of those things that I hadn't really thought about it until it actually came to the point at which I had to buy some more.
And we're not even talking remote here. As I say, we're still on Lombok. We're still in Indonesia. Imagine being somewhere really remote, and if you watch us, you'll know that we go to places where sometimes there's no one there. There's no village. There's nothing. There's nothing at all. If you're in a place like that and something goes wrong, what do?
Well, this is why you need to be carrying your spares. I'm talking of filters, filters for the engine, primary fuel filters, the water separator filter. Again, when we find them, we tend to buy 10 at a time.
We've got a locker that's stacked with all those kinds of things, because if you're sailing through the Mentawais, the small islands of Sumatra, say, and something were to happen to your engine, you're basically, I can't say it on YouTube, but you're in a terrible place, and you really need to be self-sufficient. So to avoid the really big problems, absolutely essential as a cruiser to stock up with spares of everything that you think could go wrong. Obviously you service your engine before you go anywhere, but you have all your spares.
Yeah, I noticed when we went into Mataram last week, one of the things that Indonesia is good at is hardware stores.
Yeah.
And I think it's because over here they've got a make do and mend kind of mentality. You know, working it yourself rather than getting, you know, a paid expert to come in. So a lot of stuff involving DIY the locals will do. As a consequence, there are many hardware stores. But what I noticed is that when you sort of scratch beneath the surface, they all sell the same things. So I was looking for a hydraulic sealant, for example, and Loctite make a particular type of sealant. And I thought, well, there's so many hardware stores here, I'm going to be spoilt for choice.
And to be honest, you found Loctite, you didn't find the one you wanted.
Correct. And I went into one, they had a certain set of sealants and glues. It's okay, well, I'll try the next one. Go into the next one, they sell exactly the same sealants and glues. You go to the third one and it's the same again. So, you know, and it's obviously, this is quite a specialist thing to be sourcing. So I couldn't find it. And it was our local driver who just said, you need to be buying it online. You've got to source it from Shopee or Tokopedia. And of course, the problem with that is that some of these online apps, you have to have a local credit or debit card to pay, or you pay into a 7-Eleven.
So in the past, what we've done is we've used a local friend to do it for us. They're able to order it. We just pay them cash, but because of the banking system here, they're able to order it. So that's great. This is how you get round these problems. You use local help, local knowledge. And in fact, in the end, it was another yachty. And that's the other thing, don't forget, other yachties can be really helpful. And it was a friend of ours that was able to give you some in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's very kindly lent me some. And I only need a small amount, but it's proved very useful. And it is the sort of thing that I realise now I should have one or two tubes of this stuff on board. Don't forget, one of the other problems with things like sealants and glues, especially in the tropics, is that they go off very quickly. Super glue is another example.
Never lasts.
I mean, I don't know how many tubes of super glue we buy at a time, because, if you open it once, that's it. The rest of it dries up. And I actually went out and treated myself and bought some branded super glue the other week in a special little bottle, and I thought, well, this is obviously the answer. Again, used it once, went to use it again a few days later, and it all dried up.
I think super glue generally is like that. I don't think just the tropics, is it? I think it's generally quite difficult.
Well, no.
Once you've opened it, though, it doesn't last.
The sealants are the same. I mean, in theory, what you should do is keep these things in your fridge.
Yeah,
that's the way.
Which we have done in the past.
We have, but it takes up room, and in a top-loading fridge, it's a pain in the arse because you've got to put it in a box, which takes up space, and silicone sealant is the other one that every time I go into town, I'm always buying. They now do them in the small tubes, and I just grab a couple at a time because I know they can be useful, and I know that when I use them once, they will dry up, and I'll have to open another one.
So on our top bunk, which is a bit of a storage area, we've got a big box which is devoted to different glues, and really it's nothing but glue, and another one that's devoted to tape.
Yep.
Tapes actually lasts longer than glue, doesn't it? But we have all types of both of those things. Well,
yeah, you say that, although so even some of the tapes, after a while, the glue in the tape starts to sort of seep out, and you end up with rolls of tape that get stuck together.
Sticky mass of horribleness.
But at least tape is something that we can source quite easily here. But it's really those specialist things that are specific for the boat.
Are you stopping?
Go on.
All right.
No. Well, now we're going to stop. Right.
Stop there. I'm remembering a point when we went across the north side of Sulawesi. We came around the corner, and then we went over to Tomine Bay. And along there, no, in fact, it was on the north side, we broke down. The engine broke down. Do you remember? And
do I remember? Of course I remember.
I think we put it on a video. Of course, we didn't film it at the time because it was terrifying. But we couldn't get the engine to work in a particularly nasty storm in a bay, and we were absolutely buggered there. And we got local help, didn't we?
Yeah, and we only managed to get local help because we got in contact with someone we'd met further down the coast who just so happened to know someone that lived in this town.
So you WhatsApped our friend in Tolly. He found out the right person. He then got in touch with us. And that was touch and go. Just shows you what you can do, though.
Well, it just shows you how it's great to have friends in high places like that.
Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon, or join us on FTB Mates, or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub.
I think what's interesting talking about this subject is how it's quite often the little things that you don't really think about. So when we think about preparing the boat for long passages, we tend to think of the bigger things like the sails, the seacocks, the engine, the water maker, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But quite often it's the day-to-day things that you need access to. When you're sitting at anchor and you're doing little bits of boat maintenance, you need the odd screw here or the odd bit of glue there. And it's those kind of things that if you don't have, it can hold you up. It can hold up a whole job. So you end up having to go into town to try and source it.
If there is a town.
If there is a town.
Yeah.
If not, you have to buy it online, get it delivered. And if it's coming from overseas, as you'll see in next week's episode, we ended up getting delayed by, it was well over a month.
Yeah. Completely changed our plans because of that, but we'll tell you about that next week.
But we ordered one part, that didn't work. We ordered another part, then we have to order abroad. We ended up waiting for a long time.
Yes, and had we been off an island with nobody there, we would have been buggered, totally buggered. So.
Yes. What about medical supplies?
Okay, it's not just boat parts that you have to think about. A lot of this is coming from the questions that you guys ask us. How do we deal with this, that and the other? And you've talked about the boat parts. There are medical issues that any of us could have at any age. It's not just old people like us, young people too. So clearly you have first aid kit on board, so there's a certain amount you can do yourself, but sometimes you need to go and see a doctor about something. And in a very remote area, difficult, but if people live there, the chances are there's some kind of doctor somewhere that you can find to help you. When we went through the Mentawais, I had a real problem with my eyes. One particular eye was very badly infected, and although I had brought some drops and things with me, nothing was doing it for me. So I can't remember which island it was, but one of the islands in the middle, they had a small hospital, and I was able to go in and get it treated, and they gave me antibiotics and things to take, sorted it all out. It was free. Can you believe it? It was. I said, no, I must pay. And they said, no, all medication here is free. It's paid for by the government. So even for you, I said, wow. So that was, it can be done. You can find medical supplies.
But we do carry a lot on board.
We do. I have a big box full of various antibiotics because they will sell them to you as a cruiser because they know you're going offshore and you may need to do something. Obviously, we've got the first aid stuff and first aid book, and we've done a first aid course and all of that. So medical, keep lots on board, but you will find good medical treatment even in the remoter parts of Indonesia.
Yeah, but they're still funny about things like antibiotics. So we like to keep a stock of antibiotics, but even in Asia, like in the West or certainly in the UK, normally to buy antibiotics you need a prescription from the doctor.
Yeah, you can't buy them in Malaysia. I found them here in Indonesia, but yeah. But a doctor will give you a prescription. That's what happened last time. I went in and saw him, told him we would be going offshore, and I was given a whole load, so that was cool.
Also, of course, you have to take your daily medication for your various needs.
I have hypothyroidism. It's quite common, but it does require taking something every day. And obviously, it was not over the counter in the UK, but you can buy it over the counter here. So I've been able to buy it from an apothecary here.
If you find this topic interesting and would like to continue the conversation, come and join the Follow the Boat Discord community. Look for the link in the description. It's free.
So we talked about food. Is there any other food stuffs that we have to stock up on? I'm thinking in particular Marmite, of course, is an essential that we buy, which surprisingly, actually, we've been able to find in quite a few places, haven't we?
I know, it's one of those weird things that expats seem to like here. Vegemite for the Aussies, Marmite for the Brits. But food generally, yes. So sourcing food you might think could be a little bit more difficult, and it is difficult in the remote areas in that you probably won't find what you're looking for You have to go with an open mind, look at what they've got and choose from that. So you might find some vegetables you've never seen before, some odd looking fruit. We don't eat meat, so we don't have that worry. We know other yachties that eat meat that get very worried about not being able to get hold of it. You can't always, but you can always get fish.
Yeah, and it's interesting how your diet does change. You know, and as you say, you've got to be open to that. Of course, the other thing is that a good example is how I love my mango chutney. And I was really struggling to find mango chutney, and then I thought, well, it's stupid trying to source it and buy it. You can get fresh mangoes here, just make it. So looked the recipe up and knocked out loads of mango chutney, which I then proceeded to eat in the space of about 2 days. But you do the same with tahini, so we like making hummus, for example, and of course one of the ingredients is tahini. Absolutely
essential. Tahini, not really an Indonesian food, and haven't even found it in the expat stores. So I just buy big bag loads of sesame seeds, which are everywhere around here, and I just make it from those. I toast them and grind them, and we make lovely tahini from that. So you can, you've got to think outside the box to get around it.
Well, of course, it actually works out a lot cheaper to make it that way as
well.
And
nicer.
Yes, if you've got a big bag of dried chickpeas and you've got the sesame seeds, and some olive oil, you're pretty much all the way there with that.
Yeah, you are.
So I think that really the key thing here is just not to underestimate how you need to do a bit of forward planning.
All the time, always. And if you start to use things up, for instance, I'm always keeping an eye on our rice situation. Rice you can buy everywhere. It's one of those staples that are just easy to get hold of. The moment we start going down a bit, I just top it up. So there's always loads of rice on board. And the same thing with all dried.
Well, we always joke that we have enough food on board for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that is because we have been in situations where you do run out of rice or dried beans or whatever it is, and you can't source it for another 3 months, and it's not something you want to run out of. So I think it's better to always have too much of something than too little. And the same applies for things like the water maker filters that I was talking about.
And on that subject, of course, there's the other big one, which is water. How do you source water in remote places? If you've watched us for some time, you'll know that we say that you have to have a water maker. We don't think there's any argument in that you have to have a water maker.
Well, I mean, if you're relying on rainwater, as we've seen, as we explained, when we should be getting lots of rain, we are getting no rain at all. Of course, while we're at places like this, we can get in touch with one of the local boat boys here who should be able to pick up water, drinking water that the locals buy, and they'll deliver it to the boat. So as long as there is someone around to supply water. But I think generally as a rule for us, it's to always have your water maker on board and make sure it's always working, and make sure you have enough filters.
We don't pickle it. You just keep it going.
Just keep using it.
Yeah, keep using it all the time. It's really important. We do gather some rain when we can. The thing is, if you don't have a water maker, what you end up doing is going from place to place looking for water all of the time and scrimping and saving on it. And that's fine, you can do it. You just have to plan even more without a water maker. And as long as you're going somewhere where people live, there will be water. They will get their water from somewhere. They're not dying of it, hopefully, and you can get the same water.
Yeah, well, I think that applies with food as well. As long as if there is someone living ashore, they have access to water and food.
Yeah.
So at least the basics you're not going to run out of.
Yeah.
For me, it's the little things that help with the job, the boat maintenance around the boat that you need to stay on top of.
Yeah, I mean, we have got box loads of screws and bolts and things, but not always stainless steel. That's the problem, isn't it?
It's just
for the outside the deck stuff.
It's funny how we've got this one little boat maintenance job that's been burning a hole for the last 2 months, and we've not been able to do it because
which one?
It's the fair lead for the line. So we've had to replace a piece of stainless. We got that made up. That's all fitted. That's all ready to put back in place. But it's these little stainless screws that Tim has very kindly brought back from Australia that is holding that job up.
Yes.
Who would have thought it?
Yes.
Tiny little screw.
Yes. It's not an essential, but we need it. Just makes life easy having the two either side, doesn't it?
Yep. Planning. It's all about planning.
It is all about planning, anticipating, and getting on with it.
Right. Well, it was short and sweet today. I just thought it would be a fun one just to talk about your bras and how important they are.
So in a nutshell, self-sufficiency first, keeping the place full, local knowledge, use the local knowledge. It's really important to go ashore, get to know people, because you discover all kinds of things. That's how you found things in the past, by talking to people. And use other cruisers too. They're not idiots. They're in the same situation as you are, and they may well know where to get something. That's the nutshell. Shall we ask people to leave suggestions in the comments?
Suggestions of
what has happened to them in the past and how they've got round sourcing stuff.
I'm sure there's a few things that people will say, well, you absolutely need this essential, and you need 5 of them, so do let us know.
And we're just coming from Southeast Asia. I mean, there's probably South America, Africa, I don't know, Europe, other places where you get different problems.
Right. Have a lovely weekend, or what's remaining of it, and watch next week's episode, where you can see all about how we've had to go further afield to source some essentials for the boat problems we had in our boat.
And one more thing before we go. Happy birthday, Jamie. It's his birthday on the 10th of March.